Let's start with arguably the most spine-tingling guitar solo in rock history, and the fact that it was a first take makes it almost unfair. We're talking about the outro solo on Comfortably Numb, the one that sounds like it was beamed in from another dimension. Producer Bob Ezrin and Roger Waters were watching through the glass when Gilmour stepped up, closed his eyes, and just played. That was it. Done. Perfect. He actually went back and tried recording alternate versions afterwards, because of course he did, that's what you do, but none of them touched the original. Not even close. There's something in that first take that has never been replicated, not even by the man himself. Some musicians spend entire careers at chasing a moment like that. Gilmour found it on the first try, and apparently didn't even realize it. Honestly, some people are just built differently. Here's the thing about Mark Knopfler. He never really seemed to be trying very hard, and that's exactly the point. When Dire Straits recorded Sultans of Swing, Knopfler wasn't chasing perfection. He wasn't sweating under headphones, running through take after take, trying to nail some pre-planned idea. He simply played through the song the way he felt it, finger-picking that Stratocaster with a loose, conversational ease that sounds like he's just noodling around your living room.
Yes, and an old guitar is all he can afford.
Except when your noodling around produces one of the greatest guitar solos of the late 70s, you call it a first take, and you walk away. The genius of Knopfler was always that technical precision, wrapped in the appearance of total effortlessness. No flamenco picks, no big gestures, just fingers, strings, and a natural instinct that most guitarists would trade an arm for. Fitting, really. Right, this one. If you want to talk about a guitar solo that genuinely broke the music industry's brain in two, Eruption is it. 1 minute and 42 seconds of two-handed tapping, hammer-ons, pull-offs, and techniques that most guitarists of the era didn't even know were physically possible. And it was a first take. Just Eddie warming up between takes of another track, running with the devil while the tape happened to be rolling. Guitarist Folklore says he didn't even know they were recording. He was just doing what Eddie Van Halen did on a slow afternoon. When the world heard it on the debut album in 1978, entire guitar communities had to sit down and have a quiet moment. Teachers had to rewrite lesson plans. Companies started selling instructional videos. Eddie Van Halen redefined what the instrument could do, and he did it without even meaning to. Benchmark. Full stop. Ask any guitarist worth their tuner about the twin guitar outro on Hotel California and watch their face do something involuntary. Joe Walsh and Don Felder had rehearsed the harmonies beforehand. That part was intentional, but the actual interplay, the emotional conversation between those two guitars, the way they chase each other and answer each other all the way to the fade, that came out naturally in the moment, and it was essentially a first take. There's a looseness in it that you simply can't manufacture. When two guitarists are genuinely locked in, feeling the song together rather than reading it from a chart, that's the sound you get. And it's the sound everyone who's ever heard Hotel California carries around in their head forever. Felder actually wrote the chord sequence on a cheap demo. Walsh turned it into one of the most iconic guitar moments in rock history. That's a pretty good trade. Close your eyes and listen to Europa I mean, really listen and try to tell me that doesn't sound like someone completely surrendering to the music. It sounds that way because it was. Studio engineers who were present that day have confirmed it. Santana laid down that solo in one take, and by the time it was over, everyone in the room knew they'd witnessed something that didn't need to be touched. There's a quality to Santana's playing that has always been hard to pin down. It's not just technique, and it's not just feel. It's something in between, like the guitar is actually breathing. Europa became one of the greatest jazz fusion guitar pieces ever recorded. And the version, the only version anyone talks about is the first one. Santana has said in interviews that he simply plays what he hears. Internally, on that particular day, what he heard was flawless. Now, this one comes with a story, and the story is absolutely wild. George Clinton pulled Eddie Hazel aside before recording Maggot Brain and told him, depending on which version you believe, to play as if he'd had just been told his mother had died. 10 minutes of solo guitar, one take, mostly improvised. Clinton faded most of the band down to near silence and built a sparse, spacey backdrop around Hazel's guitar exploration, which means what you're hearing for 10 minutes is basically one 20-year-old guitarist processing raw grief and releasing it through a wah pedal. The result is one of the most emotionally devastating pieces of music ever committed to tape, and it was pure improvisation, done once. Never repeated, never bettered. Some music critics consider Maggot Brain the greatest guitar solo of all time. Full stop. One take, no plan, total devastation. Eddie Hazel deserves far more recognition than history has given him. Okay, this one is special, partly because McCready himself told the story, and it's the kind of story that makes you feel something. Temple of the Dog's Reach. Down runs for over 11 minutes, and at the center of it is a guitar solo that McCready has described as the most personally meaningful thing he's ever played on tape. His headphones fell off midway through the take. He kept playing. He said afterwards that he was so deep inside the music that he barely registered it happening, that something had opened up in him. Something that had been bottled up for a long time, and it was finally getting out. You can hear it. That's not a polished performance. That's a person telling you something through the guitar. The fact that it was a first take with no safety net, while half his equipment was falling off his head, somehow makes it even more remarkable. That's the magic when it's real. Here's a fun one, because the circumstances around this solo are as chaotic as Jane's Addiction themselves. The solo on 3 Days from Ritual de lo Habitual was recorded in one take, the very first take, in a studio control room packed with Warner Brothers, A and R executives who'd shown up to observe the session. No pressure then. It was also one of the only moments during the entire album where all four members were physically in the same room at the same time. Given that Jane's addiction operated in a state of near permanent, beautiful catastrophe, that alone is worth noting. Navarro was 22 years old. The room was full of industry suits. The tape rolled, he played it once, and that was it. The version you've heard 1,000 times is the first one. Not even the only one. Literally the first one. 22 years old, in a room full of executives. One take. Some people's nerves are simply wired differently. You know the solo, you probably know every note of it. You may have, at some point in your life, attempted it badly in a music shop and been judged for it. And here's the thing that might actually hurt a little. Jimmy Page recorded it in one take. The solo that has topped more greatest guitar solos polls than any other in history. The one that builds from that gentle arpeggiated run into the full-on release at the climax, that wasn't the result of obsessive preparation. It was instinct. Page has talked about the raw, spontaneous energy of it. The feeling of playing from the gut rather than the head. No choreography, no blueprint, just a guitarist in a room responding to the song in the moment. The solo is pure emotion, played as music, and the reason it still hits 40 plus years later is precisely because you can feel that spontaneity in every note. One take. Of course it was. And we're ending with something Brian May himself described in a way that perfectly explains why first take solos sound the way they do. When talking about the Bohemian Rhapsody solo, May said, "I basically sang it. I regard the guitar in that situation as a voice. I could hear this melody and I had no idea where it came from. It came out very easily. I didn't do many takes. It was one of those occasions where you go back and listen to the first one. And the first one is almost exactly what you want." And Guitar World readers agreed. They voted it the greatest guitar solo of all time. Not the most technically demanding, not the longest, not the most pyrotechnic, the greatest. Because Brian May sang it. He heard music and translated it directly through the guitar on the first try. That's not technique. That's the thing technique is supposed to set free. And that's why these 10 solos are the ones we still talk about. The first take is the real one, every time. So there you have it. 10 guitar solos that happened once, were caught on tape, and never needed to happen again. Whether it's Gilmour's eyes closed transcendence, Eddie Hazel's grief made audible, or Brian May hearing a melody no one else could and playing it straight through, these moments remind you that the best music isn't manufactured. It arrives, and when it does, you'd better hope someone hit record. Did I miss a first take solo that belongs on this list? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely read every single one. And if classic rock and guitar history run through your veins like they do through mine, hit subscribe and let's keep this going.